In the last half an hour, voting has begun in Britain's general election. Boris Johnson and his Conservatives are tipped for victory, despite a late surge by Jeremy Corbyn's Labor. Well, SBS Europe correspondent Ben Lewis joins me now live from London. Ben, should the Tories be feeling confident?
Janice, good evening. They probably should be. They've been leading in most of the recent polls, although things have tightened up over the last few days. But many in Tory HQ will be thinking back to the 2017 election, in which Theresa May was the overwhelming favourite and the Conservatives ended up losing 13 seats. That's probably not going to happen today, but a hung parliament is still a possibility. And so Boris Johnson spent his last day on the campaign trail trying to drum up support. If the whole Prime Minister thing doesn't work out for him, Boris Johnson could always give this a go.
Why you do not so early?
You bring your chocolate milk, orange juice.
Oh, chocolate milk!
Moonlighting as a milkman, the things you do in the final hours of campaigning. The Conservative leader even baked up one last metaphor.
This is the oven ready pie. This is the get Brexit done. This is the perfect metaphor.
Never mind the oven. The Prime Minister spent a few minutes hiding in a fridge to avoid a breakfast TV interview.
Mr. Johnson, while you have 5 minutes, you're live on Good Morning. Could you talk to Piers and Susanna for me?
I'll be with you in a second.
Yeah, I have an earpiece here in my hands, ready to go. Right, he's been taken inside, into the freezer.
He's gone into the fridge.
He's been accused of avoiding scrutiny throughout the campaign.
I've not come here to deliver milk or to hide in a fridge.
Jeremy Corbyn thinks Mr Johnson dislikes tough questions because he has a casual relationship with the truth.
To him, telling the truth, telling an untruth, it all becomes some sort of vague mirage that moves on from one day to the other.
But it's Mr Corbyn's personal popularity, or unpopularity as the case may be, that's frequently cited by unhappy Labor voters. His best hope now could be a hung parliament. The biggest threat to a Tory majority could come from the Brexit Party.
Is it Gerald Farage? What do they call this gentleman?
Nigel Farage.
Nigel, that's right.
Nigel Farage could potentially split the Leave vote. The SNP thinks it has Scotland all wrapped up.
If we don't want to be dragged out of Europe against our will and to have Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, then vote SNP to make sure we take our future into our own hands.
While the anti-Brexit Liberal Democrats started strongly, their numbers have slipped in recent weeks. But they could still steal some Tory seats in Remain-supporting areas.
Keep fighting, work for every last vote, and let's do this. Let's stop Brexit, stop Boris, and build a brighter future.
The one thing all party leaders agree on is that this is the most consequential general election in a generation. They're probably right. The new government will determine what happens with Brexit, which will affect almost every aspect of life here. Decisions made by the next Prime Minister will change the United Kingdom for decades to come. From the storybook villages of southern England to the industrial working class north, in proud but deprived towns in rural Wales, the most remote parts of Scotland, and in bitterly divided Northern Ireland, voters are now casting their ballots to decide what Britain's future will look like. Not that everyone's thrilled with the options available.
There is no choice. I don't like either of the main candidates, so I'm struggling.
None of them tell the truth. They just don't tell the truth. They're just out for themselves.
I think it's been incredibly divisive, yes. I mean, it's been very noisy, very argumentative.
Still, voters have been presented with two very different visions, one promising to bring Britain out of a Brexit rut.
What is it that we're going to do? We're going to get Brexit done.
The other pledging radical change.
You go down the road with Boris Johnson, a sweetheart deal with Donald Trump, you break off any serious relationship with Europe, or you go down the Labour way, which is the adult responsible way.
This hasn't been a hugely inspiring campaign, but this election couldn't be more important. We've spent much of the last 6 weeks travelling around the United Kingdom, speaking to voters about what's important to them, and we learnt a couple of key things. The first is that both major party leaders, Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn, are deeply unpopular, even within their own parties. That was a little bit of a surprise for Mr Johnson. The second thing is the amount of misinformation that's out there. I lost track of the number of times we'd speak to voters, mainly older voters, who shared with us myths, truths and lies about parties and candidates that they'd almost always read on Facebook. This is not an election campaign that either party will likely be particularly proud of. Janice, we're expecting the exit poll results released by British broadcasters to be out at about 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Time tomorrow. The official results a few hours after that.
And I'm sure you will be updating us. That is Ben Lewis joining us live from London, where dawn is breaking on election day. And tune in to SBS tomorrow morning for the BBC's election coverage. It begins at 9 o'clock Eastern Daylight Saving Time. Check your local guides for details from where you are.